Before I begin, I feel it is necessary to point out that the news arm of the BBC has yet to retract, apologize, or otherwise address the deeply transphobic reporting it has engaged in the last few months. In a pinned comment down below, you'll find my original video on the topic, several videos from the YouTuber Sean, who has been ongoing in his pursuit of trying to get the BBC to own up to what they have done, and also a video from Laura Kate Dale showing the protests that have taken place outside of the BBC offices. While I don't feel any of the people behind Doctor Who are in any way responsible for this, I cannot in good conscience talk about a BBC-owned property without mentioning this first, until such time as it is properly redressed. Thank you. Ugh, voting. Such a hassle. Classic Doctor Who review. It has been way too long since I have tackled a classic story, and the folks over on my Patreon have voted on Vengeance on Varos, 6th Doctor story. If in the future you want to be able to vote on things like upcoming topics for review videos or other general topics, or just want to see early access to what I'm doing, there's the link to the Patreon. We'll drop it early. But anyways, this is a 6th Doctor story. I haven't had a great track record with 6th Doctor stories, at least not ones from the show. On Big Finish and in audio drama, boy, they knew how to work him so much better. I've heard in the past that this is considered one of the best, if not the best, 6th Doctor stories. Now, I actually did watch it once before, but I didn't really remember it. In hindsight, I'm thinking I must have had it on while I was doing something else, because, specific things rang a bell, but overall, I'm there's a lot of the connective tissue that just felt new to me watching it this time, which to me says that I wasn't fully paying attention to it last time I watched it, because only the major stuff stuck at all. So this is a story all about how my 90s kid. Sorry. it's a reflex. But this takes place on a planet called Varos, and that planet is a poor mining planet. The inhabitants there, they pretty much all work for the mining. The governor is in the process currently of negotiating with a mining company, a renewal of the contract. He is trying to get them paid more per unit of the mineral that they are mining. And the guy from the mining corporation is just scoffing at that idea. And he figures he can hold out until the governor is, killed. The political system here is kind of interesting. So you find out the full details of this by the end. But the way it works is, when the governor has a major decision, they will take their position on what they want to do. So the governor still gets to decide, here's the course of action. The people then get to vote whether they agree or disagree. A little bit of a up or down referendum thing going on. And if the governor gets too many, every time he gets a no vote, he's basically subjected to this, they call it a cell destroyer or something like that. And if he gets no voted too many times, it's just going to kill him. So it puts the governors in this odd situation where if they're trying to do something that's for the good of everybody but isn't popular, like for instance, this governor right now is trying to hold out for a better price, which if he can get it will be better for everybody, but it does risk them losing this contract and people aren't agreeing, and he's probably going to die next time he loses a vote at the point that we sort of come in, or at least shortly after we come in. And the other thing that's interesting about this political system is that governors don't get to choose this job. They are pulled out of a pool of viable candidates who exist at a certain level of position within the power structure, and then they now have that job whether they want it or not. The theory being that someone who did not actively want the position but whose life depends on the outcome of choices will work that much harder to get fast and beneficial results. But obviously we're coming in at a point where if that system ever worked, it has broken down and is being taken advantage of by this mining corporation, who basically just get to hold out on a price and hold the threat of death over the current governor. Either he'll cave because he doesn't want to die, or he'll die and they'll go again on the next one. So I really found that entire political system to be really fascinating because it's more thought out and more explained than we often get in something like Doctor Who. And I'm not sure as a practical matter it actually makes a ton of sense, but strictly philosophically speaking, it's an interesting approach, both sort of explaining the idea behind it and why it is the way it is, but actually not even having to explain, demonstrating in episode how this has broken down and stopped working. So that's interesting. Now you'll notice in that initial sum up of sort of the situation we're dealing with, I didn't mention the Doctor, which sort of brings me to my major sticking point on this episode, which is, and this is not a problem unique to this episode, this actually happens a bit with the Sixth Doctor specifically, which is that he doesn't feel exceptionally involved in what's actually going on. Now, this is not the most egregious instance of that. I think I still consider Revelation of the Daleks to be the most egregious instance of that. But it's not great. And honestly, I think part of it is just the way that the episodes are structured differently right now, because this is during a time when Doctor Who went from 22-minute episodes to 44-minute episodes and fewer per story. So whereas the standard Doctor Who story used to be 4 episodes at about 22 minutes apiece, it's now 2 episodes at 44 minutes apiece. And while you'd think that doesn't make a huge difference, at least in terms of total time available, it does kind of impact things, because I found myself thinking, because I noticed the Doctor really doesn't become even a passive part of the story going on. The first half of the first episode, he and Peri are just drifting in the TARDIS. Like, they're out of fuel, stuff's gone wrong. That's why they end up on Varos. They actually need some of this mineral to get the TARDIS up and running again. But they don't even talk about going to this planet, much less get there, until about halfway through the first episode. And here's the thing that I realized. That's actually not atypical for a classic Doctor story. The difference is, under the old structure, coming in halfway into the first episode meant 11 minutes into the total story, whereas here, it means about 22 minutes into the total story, and it makes it feel like all this stuff is going on with the absence of the Doctor. It makes him feel less active, even though if you're looking at what point in the first episode does he come in? About halfway through. Well, same as it frequently was before, but the time difference length of that episode actually changes how actively he feels involved in the story. So having realized that, I still think it's a problem. I'm a little gentler on it, at least in this particular instance, because it feels like kind of a hiccup of the new structure that the writing staff and team haven't fully adapted to yet. So I'm slightly gentler on it here than I might have otherwise been, simply because I kind of had that realization. Now, as far as the Doctor's part in this goes, as I said, he and Peri show up just because they need some of this mineral, they need the fuel, but they immediately find themselves in a situation where they help a guy escape from a torture thing. That's another thing this society has going on. They broadcast a lot of torture. It is a totalitarian system, despite the enforced democracy aspect. It's a weird hodgepodge, but in a way that feels interesting. But he helps free a resistance person, and like they're then stuck in, what are they called? The Judgment Dome? Something like that. They're stuck in this facility that is intended for punishment, interrogation, and just warping of the mind of anyone who they want to mess with for the entertainment of the public, because every aspect of this place is being videoed and broadcast out for entertainment purposes, not only of the local populace, but this is their secondary form of commerce after the mineral, because they package it and sell it as entertainment. They basically are selling blood sport material. And so that's the other thing that's going on there. But the Doctor's core motivation of finding the mineral and, just trying to help the situation a little bit is much more smaller scale. He doesn't come in and like with the intention of trying to help all these people. And it's debatable at what point he even kind of takes that position. Everything he does serves his own immediate needs, even when it helps the residents of this planet in the bigger picture. So like, for instance, towards the back end, he basically kind of teases and hints to the governor that the mining corporation is lying to them about how valuable this mineral is and is deeply underpaying them. Not by a little, but by a lot. And that prospect obviously is something intriguing to the governor, and that changes his bargaining position. But the thing is, the Doctor doesn't bring that up until he finds himself in a more or less life or death situation. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that because, like, he has a noose around his neck. We find out later he realized the noose actually wasn't going to kill him. It was basically a fake death trap so that people would, theoretically, with their dying words, say something that was undoubtedly true. But even knowing that, it didn't feel altruistic in any way. It felt like, I'm going to play the game in a way that gets me the best benefit. It happens to be helping you and this planet and these people, but that never really feels like his goal, which is kind of a general thing about the Sixth Doctor, especially as he was depicted on the TV series, which is that he's just not a really good guy. And that in and of itself doesn't have to be a problem, but it's certainly not to my preference and my taste in terms of a Doctor. His moral compass is much more centered on self with this particular incarnation, which, broadly speaking, I don't love, but I get that that's kind of his deal. Again, they balanced it better when he started getting audio adventures. Now, I haven't mentioned Syl yet. Syl is the representative of the mining corporation, and he is great in a way that's actually really hard for me to pin down because his performance is the kind of over-the-top, it's not an unimpressive costume and makeup look, but it's like, it's so obvious. You can tell all the seams, and, between saying sentences, he's like, it's so campy and weird, like in a way that actually kind of reminds me of the Absorbal Off from Love and Monsters. And yet it works here. I'm honestly going to just chalk it up to the performer, I think. There's just something about the performance he delivers, and I think it has to do with when he gets upset or realizes his position is weakening, his fear and tension around that is believable. So it doesn't feel like that sort of sleazy, cartoonish villain is just painted over everything, like as another modern era example, like, say, Max Capricorn. He does, when he realizes he might not get what he wants, he does crack a little bit in a way that makes him more believable as a actual character and less as a cartoon. I think that might be the tiny bit of difference that makes this work, whereas other instances and similarly over-the-top performances have not worked for me, like, at all. So that might be the difference there. In addition to Syl, there's some nifty makeup. There's some sort of transformation makeup that gets done on a couple of characters later on, which is not too badly done. They also, don't have to move in it. That probably helped. Peri as a companion is fine. I still don't love her, but it has less to do with the performance and more just to do with the way the stories treat her as a character. They always seem overly rough on her. Like, she gets slapped in this. Like, can we stop knocking Peri around? Seriously. Coming back to Colin Baker himself, I think overall his general demeanor works better for me here. I think some moments that exemplify that well are where he very clearly doesn't know what he should do next, but he still moves forward with confidence. Like, they suddenly realize the TARDIS isn't where they expected it to be because they thought they were just going to be able to escape. And he's like,
it can't be far away. Come on.
It's a moment that, where his bluster works, where you realize the use of his blustery personality is that he's going to still power on bold as brass, even when things don't have a clear way of working out. And that's like a moment where aspects of his character that don't always work clicked into place and worked a bit better. That having been said, I don't love how much violence this particular Doctor exhibits. Now, to be fair, it's not direct violence. It's pretty much all indirect in one way or another, but it is still all his fault. So there's 3 instances on this. The first is he sets up a trap with this deadly laser beam thing sort of beaming around the corner as they run off, and some guards follow them. One of them walks into the path of this thing and is killed. Did the Doctor specifically set up knowing for certain it was going to kill someone? Did he intentionally target that guy? No, he set up a trap, somebody fell into it, but it was a deadly trap, which don't like that. So the second one, he kind of startles these 2 guards. They're kind of standing over like an acid bath. I'm not going to explain how this happens. Now, the first one who gets startled and falls in, I'll buy that one's an accident. But after that, the Doctor gets caught in a struggle with the second one. And while technically the second guy falls into the acid bath because the first guy comes up and is like grasping to pull out and pulls the guy in, But the Doctor kind of been pushing that second guy back towards it. I'm blaming the Doctor for that second one. And then the third thing is there's like these deadly vines in this labyrinth, and the Doctor has this other guy like tie them up out of the way and then release them so they fall down and hit the people pursuing them and poison them. So like technically someone else did it, but it was the Doctor's plan. And he was the one who said, do it now. So like the way in which this is trying to work around the idea that the Doctor doesn't kill people, like like these are technicalities that I don't think are gonna hold up in court, dude. So I don't really love that. There's some other like little weird oddities to it. Like these have got to be the slowest firing lasers in sci-fi history. And it's also kind of really funny watching the Doctor board what is essentially a golf cart to try and make a getaway. It's so slow. It's ridiculous. And sort of coming back to the Doctor not being super involved in what's going on, the Doctor isn't really that involved in the solution to how to get out of the situation. But the only thing he does is he sets the ball rolling on that insofar as he makes the governor aware that they are just how badly they are being shortchanged. But other than that, pretty much even the solution happens without him, which, again, kind of irks me as far as how uninvolved in the overall story he is. Now, I can still say that, like, the story does play out different because he's there, but not necessarily because it felt like he had agency in it. He just happened to kick things in a certain direction. So, here's what I'll say. I can actually probably safely say this is the Sixth Doctor story I like the most of the ones I've seen. This is one I wouldn't mind watching again. Because for all the things that I've complained about and aspects of this Doctor that I don't really like, things going on with Peri and some of not so great effects, etc., it's got interesting ideas and decent performances. The guy who plays the governor is especially good, honestly. And like I said, Syl, I can't say it's a good villain, but he's an enjoyable villain. And so I liked him. There seemed to be like an interesting, I don't know if nuance is the right thing, but like not being overly judgmental with the political commentary going on, because we don't, like, limited budget, Doctor Who, small cast, we don't see that many just citizens. It's basically embottled by this one couple, this man and this woman, and we see how they vote, and we'll like see overall numbers of yeses and nos, but we don't see anybody else. So they're kind of standing in for the rest of the society. But it's interesting sort of seeing how things play out, where, you know, which of them is leaning what way for what reasons, the way they get frustrated with each other, the way that at the end of it, when they're sort of like, we're going to change this system is unjust, we need to change it, they just kind of turn to each other and go, what do we do now? I don't know. And a more cynical-minded person could almost say that's like almost an indictment of freedom. They don't even know what to do with it. For me, it's a little bit more open-ended. Hopeful be an overstep, but more of a, you got to figure it out now, because that's what happens when you have more control over your life. And again, the straight up and down vote on every one of the governor's decisions is actually more interesting now in the wake of something like Brexit, you know, than it was at the time. Well, presumably at the time. I wasn't watching it at the time. But that wasn't an aspect that clocked me as particularly interesting back when I watched this the first time, like a decade ago. So I think this is decent. This is pretty good, especially for this era, which is a rocky era for Doctor Who. But this is pretty solid. And like I say, I'm comfortable saying best of the Colin Baker stories that I've seen thus far. There aren't that many to see. I'll get through all of them eventually. However, not right away, because before we get the new Doctor Who special Legends of the Sea Devils, I need to rewatch and do a review of the original The Sea Devils. That'll be next month, before the new Jodie Whittaker special comes out. But in any case, Vengeance on Varos. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. I mentioned the Patreon already. All that helps me out, but also don't worry about it too much. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. It's the end credits. Means I gotta shout out some patrons. This month, it is Turok, Oliver B., Linda Walters, TT, Robin Powell, Frenobulax, The Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Dharma Michael Doyle, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Casperl, Adam Lefty Taylor, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks so much for your support.